No, as the Premier said, it's an ongoing evaluation process. It hasn't been locked down in terms of particular milestones over particular timeframes, but clearly the greater the vaccination coverage, especially for those most at-risk populations and for those most at risk of exposure, so our frontline healthcare workers, the quarantine and port of entry workers, when the coverage of those populations and the elderly and those with chronic illness, the high coverage in those populations would give me, as for everyone in Australia, greater confidence that we can go to freer settings, but we're not at a point where they're locked in terms of specific detail.
And do you think we'll see more of those day 11 positive tests? I know you don't think more, but it might be.
There's not that many left to run. Clearly, a lot of individuals have already completed their quarantine period, the incubation period of 14 days as primary close contacts. We're really closing off those last few dozen over the next few days. So it's possible, and we need to re-emphasise the issue that anyone who hasn't completed their quarantine period could become a case, needs to remain quarantined for that full period. But I'm not sure we'll see any more. It's not out of the question.
Do you feel more optimistic now than in the past we're now in COVID normal, so to speak, will stay that way? Do you feel it's a better position?
Yeah, we've been building in confidence as time goes by, and clearly the vaccine rollout is another step in that direction. Getting on top of these clusters in recent weeks and seeing how that's been done rapidly and robustly, that's all confidence building. It's certainly the case that a few thousand vaccines do not herd immunity make. We need really high coverage for the vaccine, which will take some months to get there.
What does it tell us that people testing so late?
There's still a possibility that anyone can test positive, anyone can become symptomatic right through that 14-day period. We have to be alive and alert to that possibility. The new variants of concern that are emerging need a really robust response. You need to get to those primary and secondary close contacts because of that infectiousness. The fact that household members are testing positive, are becoming symptomatic as those primary close contacts are testing positive is a concern. But we know the process of having 3 rings of control is really critical. But you don't want to see community transmission, widespread community transmission with any variant of concern, which is really any virus going forward. They've really become the predominant variants across the world, and new ones will emerge, and they will bring new challenges in terms of disease severity or infectiousness, or indeed challenges to the vaccines that are in production.
But is the working assumption that these cases may have been a lot later in the piece at the moment in the last few days?
We're dealing with small numbers, so clearly we've identified a few on day 11, but where people haven't developed symptoms, it may well be that they would have tested positive much earlier in the piece after the day 3 test, but we pick them up now. We go through a process of doing that day 11 testing, and we're required day 14 testing to make sure we pick them up, because you can be pre-symptomatic, you can be asymptomatic and still pass it on.
Specific to some of the restrictions, in New South Wales they're doing 50 people in their house, but nightclubs are still closed. You can get 30 people in the house, but one person per 2 square metres. So you could be in the nightclub with 100 randoms, but 30 people in the home. How does that work?
Yeah, look, it's not a race with other jurisdictions, and they'll each come to their points of determination around limits as they see fit. The advice of my public health team is that these are settings that are appropriate. You go to more liberal settings, you carry a greater risk. There are some specific settings that we know are higher risk, and we've placed greater controls on them. That applies to gyms and some other indoor settings where clearly masks are required. So those are the settings that we've determined based on our assessments of public health risk. I'm not going to comment on other jurisdictions' decisions in that regard.
Just on, again, as the Chief Health Officer said, no, we most certainly